So there's like a good hour of this movie that's just Obi-Wan walking into places and asking people questions, and these two idiots rolling around in grass and things like that.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing together fans and critics alike to share their thoughts on a film that either they really connect to emotionally, or something that they really care about, or something they grew up with, something like that. But this is actually the second installment in an ongoing look at probably one of the franchises that typifies that connection to filmmaking the most, and that is the Star Wars saga. So this episode, I'd like to welcome Pete Langhelt to the show. Pete, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Really good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
So a couple of different things. One, can you tell the listeners a little bit about your podcast, the Pete and Fran Podcast, and about your connection to the Star Wars saga?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a podcast with my wife, Fran. We're both sort of creative types. I'm a comedian and I work in film. She doesn't work in the creative side of things, but she likes to perform with me. We mainly do improv, things like that. She likes to get involved with the sketches that we do on the podcast. Mainly on the show, we talk about movies as well. We kind of flit around the genres, but we are mainly sci-fi fans, but we like to get involved in the B movies as well.
That's funny that you do the podcast with your wife, because my wife she's actually been on the Crooked Table Podcast many times. We actually not too long ago did an Avengers Endgame spoilers review. We just went, we recorded it over a bottle of wine and just talked about the movie over like 2 hours. So it's very off the cuff, things like that. What's been your experience recording the podcast with your wife, like as named co-hosts?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, we've both got pretty much the same kind of sense of humor.
That helps.
As well, I like to, I'll throw stuff in that she has no idea that we're going to do, because she reacts better, I think, when she's taken by surprise. So, yeah, it's always good fun when she's like, what the hell are you doing now? We did our Avengers Endgame episode as well. But we also included an interview with Richard Nixon. So obviously it was me doing the voice of Nixon, which threw her a bit.
Yeah, you've also had some George Lucas content on your podcast. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I got some clips of most of his sort of most famous interviews, and sort of spliced them into questions I made. I didn't take me long to throw it together. I mainly spoke to him about constipation, and so he's always saying like, "Oh, and it was a big release," things like that. So like, what just cuts in so easily, yeah.
Faster and more intense.
Yeah.
Which is a phrase you can apply like literally any comedic way. Yeah, exactly.
I used some of it to talk about his sexual performance and things as well. Just felt a bit bad because I love George, really.
Yeah, and it's funny how talking about the movie we're going to talk about in this episode, how the prequels like created such a divide in the Star Wars fandom that it's perpetuated even more so now, I think, by the sequels and The Last Jedi and the reaction to the Disney side of things. It's like, gosh, I think social media has obviously escalated that a lot more. But yeah, so when did you grow up as a huge fan of the Star Wars franchise, or like when did you come to it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'd say, I was about 6 years old, and my mum and dad were like, watch these, keep yourself quiet. So they had them taped directly off the TV on VHS. So all three of the original trilogy. I think they probably still got them in the attic, but I'd love to watch them again because they're interspersed with sort of old British commercial breaks.
Nice.
Yeah, and they must have been recorded early 90s, late 80s. So there's some stuff on there that you can't even buy in the shops anymore.
Yeah, the original versions of the trilogies too, not the special
little
edition.
time capsules.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to see what was cut out of them as well for the TV versions.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's always fun. That's an experience that I think today's today's viewers aren't really, unless they catch something on TBS or on basic cable television, there are elements of that, but I think so much now is streaming that you don't have that experience of discovering things on television. Or, I mean, you mentioned having things taped off the TV. We had an entire cabinet in our wall unit at our house that was all just movies taped off of.
Indiana Jones, things like that, exactly, all taped off the TV.
Exactly. With the some of them will have the HBO intro in the beginning of it, or commercials, like you're saying. So yeah, that's always fun to go back and revisit some of those. So, well, I guess we should just transition into the movie we're going to talk about this week. But before we do that, definitely check out the Pete and Fran podcast. It's really, really funny stuff, and Pete does a lot of work to put out quality content for listeners. So definitely check that out, people listening to this episode. So we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. Let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
Anakin, don't do anything without first consulting either myself or the Council.
You don't need guidance, Anakin. I see you becoming the greatest of all Jedi.
The boy has exceptional skills.
His abilities have made him arrogant.
Excuse me. I'm in charge of security here, milady.
They are using a bounty hunter named Jango Fett to create a clone army.
Wait.
We must stop them before they're ready.
Your clones are very impressive.
They'll do their job well.
Blast, that's why I hate flying.
This is a crisis. The Senate must vote the Chancellor emergency powers.
As my first act, I will create a grand army of the Republic to counter the increasing threats of the Separatists.
Hasn't been a full-scale war since the formation of the Republic.
You must join me, Obi-Wan, and together we will destroy the Sith.
That was a little bit of the trailer for Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. Directed by George Lucas, written by George Lucas and Jonathan Hales. It's actually the only of the prequels that has a co-writer, which is interesting, considering that I think the writing in this movie is possibly the most criticized of the prequels.
With the sound.
We'll get to that. We'll definitely get to that. So this came out in May 2002. It's actually the lowest grossing of the prequel trilogy. That tends to happen though. Like even the original Empire is considered for the most part. I think it's kind of A New Hope and Empire for what's the best Star Wars film. But Empire is the lowest grossing of the original trilogy. So that's kind of the pattern that these the Star Wars films tend to follow. But I'm assuming you saw Attack of the Clones in theaters. What was your initial reaction and, your take on it coming out?
Well, I mean, I was still quite young at the time. I would have been just sort of getting to the age where I was kind of too old to go with my dad, but I know he wanted to go, so we kind of went together. And yeah, I loved them coming out. It's, when you first see them, they're just as exciting, I think, as seeing the original trilogy for the first time, especially if you're quite young when they come out. But I mean, over time, they date quite badly, especially I'd say the effects in places. But I mean, I still love the prequels. Mm-hmm. Not so much the Phantom Menace, but I still love Attack of the Clones and definitely Revenge of the Sith as well. I really, really like. They're not perfect, but I think they're still really fun, and I enjoy watching them.
Yeah, I have kind of a similar relationship with the prequels. I think The Phantom Menace, which at this point people will have heard the episode on that, The Phantom Menace is probably one that I've lost more respect for over the last 20 years in celebrating the 20th anniversary this year of that movie. But I had the VHS of Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and by the time Revenge of the Sith came out, that was already on DVD. But I did watch those, both of them on video quite often, especially Attack of the Clones. And I think that's mostly because of the Obi-Wan side of it, and the fact that I mentioned this in the last episode on Phantom Menace, that the episode 1 feels really like a prologue to the main story, and this is really where it actually feels like it's starting to have much more connective tissue.
Yeah, absolutely, I'd agree with that. And I'd say I really like once it gets going, you start to see things that you haven't seen before. Phantom Menace, I mean, yeah, it's different to the original trilogy, and you got kind of, your lightsaber battle at the end, it's slightly different, but it's still just like one or two guys fighting. And then suddenly Attack of the Clones comes along, and it's this enormous battles. There's Jedis everywhere. There's Yoda like using a lightsaber. I think it's when it starts to really break some new ground. And whether you like it or not, or whether you love it, you hate it, it is something you haven't seen before.
That's definitely true. And when this came out, I think I saw it in theaters at least 2 or 3 times, which is usually the max. I mean, I'm not one of those people that's gone to see theater movies like 7 times in theaters, things like that. But I did see this in IMAX back when IMAX still had the 2-hour cap. So they actually edited out a lot of the romance stuff. They edited it out. It's actually a leaner, it's actually a leaner cut of the movie. Actually, I think it improves the film quite a bit, trimming down a lot of Anakin and Padme rolling around in grass and talking about sand, as you alluded to, and all that stuff. I'm like, we could have cut this down a little bit. But you can, even with all of that, this film makes completely different mistakes than The Phantom Menace, I think, in a lot of ways. And you can tell that George Lucas took a lot of the criticism of Episode 1 to heart here. I mean, the fact that Jar Jar is in it much less, the politics are there, but it's not quite as in your face. The first one has entire long sequences in the Senate, and here it's a much shorter. Yeah,
that's like one of the ongoing criticisms. Throughout they say, in the prequels there's far too much of the politics. You're right. In this particularly, it's very trimmed down. I think I've sort of gone through and done. I'm that much of a nerd about Star Wars that I've gone through and done like fan edits and things of these. And there's like 2 scenes with the separatists discussing their plans, and that's it. And they're both quite short. And there's other stuff going on while that's happening. It's like it's chopped in quickly. Like you can blink and you can kind of miss what their plans are almost.
Yeah, and I think some people could see that as a criticism because Count Dooku is mentioned pretty much right after the opening assassination attempt on Senator Amidala. We're obviously picking up 10 years later, and there's that whole scene where she's on top of it. She's like, I think Dooku's behind it, and this is where, and I alluded to this when I discussed Episode 1, the arrogance of the Jedi really comes through. Where Mace Windu is so like, I don't think Count Dooku could be capable of that. He was once a Jedi. It's not in his character. Things like that. Like you really see the I guess kind of fatal flaw of the Jedi Order right off the bat in this film. So in Episode 1, you're introduced to Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. You're introduced to Sidious right away. And then same here, you're introduced to the Jedi Council, and you see Chancellor Palpatine coming to puppet mastering everybody. Even though Yoda gives him some side eye, they don't really act on it.
Yeah, that's an ongoing thing with Yoda throughout the prequels. It's kind of like, I suspect something's happening, but I don't really know what, and I have no idea how to deal with it.
Right. Yeah. Something's going on there. Our vision is clouded, but it's probably fine. Let's not worry about it too much.
Yeah, Anakin seems really sweaty, and I don't know why.
Well, I think, as far as, we catch up with Anakin, and he's obviously been pining for Padme since he was 9 years old, I guess. And it's pretty clear that Obi-Wan knows about his feelings, and that's the thing that's also kind of strange about their dynamic, which it's a Jedi Master and a Padawan, but it's also kind of like a father-son, but it's also it evolves into more of a brother relationship in the following film. But he clearly knows Anakin's feelings on things. He's very open about it, and yet again there's red flags all over the place, and nobody's really doing anything to intervene. They're just like, well, George said we should just let it be. So
yeah, there's a lot of I don't think it's a great idea to send Anakin with Padme. So who should go with Padme? Send Anakin.
And it's always Palpatine's idea. It's like, how about, an old face like Master Kenobi and things like that. And, I guess coming into this film with now Hayden Christensen taking over for Jake Lloyd, whose performance was ripped to shreds constantly over the last 20 years to the point that it basically destroyed the actor's life. How do you think Hayden Christensen picks up the torch of the Anakin Skywalker role here, as far as seeming like the same character, I guess, at least?
Yeah, I mean, they do seem very different, but you don't get to see the transition. You never see you never see his bond with Obi-Wan grow. It's just like they're in a lift. Oh, they're friends now. You know, they've been on these wacky adventures we never see. I mean, if you're really into the kind of expanded universe, I mean, in between 2 and 3, we get the Clone Wars series, but I mean, that's like only just finished, right? So that's kind of, you can discount that. It was a weird decision, I think, for them to go from Anakin as a child to begin with, really. I don't really know why he did that, but George Lucas makes a lot of crazy decisions. But on Hayden Christensen, I think, for what he's given, especially with his dialogue, I think he does a pretty good job, especially when we get to the Revenge of the Sith. I love his death scene. I think that's a pretty good scene, even though, again, it's quite clunky and the scenes preceding it are over long. Hayden Christensen's good, I think. But again, he's not given a lot to work with.
Which is also what happened to Jake Lloyd. I mean, he's a child actor, had only been in a couple things before this, and now you're like, hey, can you play young Darth Vader and somehow please everyone with that performance? I think he does the sort of seething anger and resentment thing much better than he does, the whininess that tends to be a Skywalker trait, and obviously the romance and all of that. And, starting Anakin's journey with him as a little boy who met Padme for, 9 and 14, it also now creates this really awkward transition where their relationship's supposed to sort of turn into a romance, even though, she obviously doesn't see it that way. She hasn't been thinking of him for 10 years. She's just like, hey, how did this happen? You look like a completely different actor now. So, we'll get into the romance part of it later, but it's kind of an awkward reunion between Obi-Wan, Anakin, Padme, and Jar Jar.
Yeah.
The 4 principal heroes of the original, the previous film.
Exactly. And it's like thrown right at you as well. It's like landing, bomb, here's all your characters. Like, whoa, give us some time here. I mean, I always hate to go like, here's what I would have done. But maybe just sort of, you could have had the bomb and then cut to just like a really short little adventure that Obi-Wan and Anakin were having, just to kind of see them with a bit of chemistry and show them working together. You very rarely see them working together as a unit, really. I mean, you get it at the end of Attack of the Clones, but never again. The next time you see them together, they're sort of fighting, really, or arguing.
Right.
Yeah. So it's hard to buy them as friends.
I agree. And then, we'll get to that in a second, how the narrative really splits off after, I guess, the first act of this film. But I even now, I mean, I loved it then, but I still really love that whole chase sequence through the skies of Coruscant and Obi-Wan leaping out of the window. I should just say that I really love Ewan McGregor in this role. Yeah. In Phantom Menace, not so much, just because of the way Obi-Wan's written. He doesn't. And
again, he's given very little to do. He's kind of on the ship sulking the whole time.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, another pathetic life form. This is pretty much his demeanor in most of Phantom Menace. And it's not until he takes down Darth Maul where it's, okay, there you go. That's the Obi-Wan that I recognize. Yeah. So having him in this, mullet and all, running around, jumping out the window after the probe droid and the ensuing chase that takes place with Anakin, like, I think all that stuff is a ton of fun. Whether the effects hold up,
I mean, come on, they were a long time ago now, and watching them, and this is always, these films are really for children, etc., etc. Watch it as a child, though. Watch those action scenes; they'll blow your mind, and they certainly blew mine when I was seeing them for the first time.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the only mission that we really get with Anakin and Obi-Wan. Yeah. But it does feel like old school Star Wars in a way. Like, it has that energy behind the sequence that was lacking for almost all of Phantom Menace, honestly. Phantom Menace is very, like, kind of plotting, and now Obi-Wan, now you meet Anakin, and now R2-D2, that's going to be an important character later on. Like, it's just table setting, basically, which is why this film because it jumps into things after the awkward reunion, kind of jumps right into the plot. I appreciate that a lot, and I love the little bit of work that this sequence does to establish Anakin and Obi-Wan's dynamic.
Yeah, because it's still very much a master pupil, but you can see that Anakin is not happy being a pupil, and he's already starting to resent Obi-Wan, and he does let his emotions cloud his judgment, as Yoda would say. Yeah.
And I like the visual references to, so we get another visit to a bar that kind of feels reminiscent of the cantina a little bit, but like a kind of a different kind of seedy than Mos Eisley. And the first time we really see Jango Fett in action. What were your thoughts, going into this film, and obviously knowing Boba Fett and what a fan favorite that character is, the fact that we were going to see his father, another bounty hunter in very similar armor, and getting to explore the Fett legacy, I guess, a little bit. Did you think that this film lived up to that, or what did you think about Tamora Morrison's performance?
I like the performance. It's a hard thing to dig into because you're given so little from the original trilogy. Yes. It's George Lucas's baby, so that's him taking it in the direction he saw it as. What I really liked about the chase scene is that you kind of get to see Coruscant. You kind of see the different levels. Kind of a bit like Fifth Element almost. You kind of you see as the city goes down, it gets scuzzier, and I liked that element of it. Maybe again, just a bit more development. You could have kind of seen Jango sort of interacting with the kind of lower classes of the city, things like that. But I really enjoyed it. I thought his character, the performance was fine, but everything kind of feels like it's rushing towards the finish line a little bit. There are things that I think the film could have benefited from spending more time on, and things the film could have spent less time on, and had a much better movie as a result.
That's why I think I would actually love to see the IMAX cut, like I mentioned, because it trims a lot of the slower elements of the least successful element of this movie is the romance. I think that's pretty much universal across the board. And by trimming that back, it makes the story feel more propulsive, and puts the plot focus much more on Obi-Wan, because that's really the key to getting closer to the Sith, to getting closer to the birth of the Empire and all of that. So that's why I think, as I mentioned, Obi-Wan has his little detective story that he goes on. Him and Anakin split, and we get basically like a space noir with him trying to break down each of the clues, starting with the Camino and Saber Dart, and trying to locate a missing planet. Like, I loved all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And again, you could have expanded on that, especially kind of said a noir story. Make it a bit more noir. I mean, he finds the main clue by going to this brightly lit diner and in a room full of wacky aliens and big CG monsters, and he gets all the clues from them. It would have been good to see him go into these lower seedy areas again, get a bit more of that sort of Mos Eisley cantina feel to it, and shaking down some witnesses, things like that, acting like a dirty cop. Kind of see the darker side to Obi-Wan. I think that would have made it better. But there's a lot of stuff that's good in Attack of the Clones, but that's the thing they should have developed on. And like you say, you get more of this romance that's definitely not George's strong suit.
No, not at all. Yeah. But seeing a little bit, I like your idea. If they had gone a little bit, not to have Obi-Wan necessarily go rogue, but having him
wear some kind of detective hat.
Yeah, exactly. But having him walk right up to that line and inheriting a little bit more of Yoda even mentions at the end of Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon's defiance, and inheriting a little bit of that, bending the rules in order to unravel this mystery. I think that would have benefited the film a lot more and put Ewan McGregor even more front and center than he already is in this. He's already top billed and all of that. But
you must have been able to see, I mean, his previous work before these films, you can see that he's very capable of going like dark, in Trainspotting.
Right.
You've got the guy from Trainspotting. This guy's got a good range. You can put him in all sorts of situations. You're going to get a good result. I mean, he's underused, but this is a sort of quite a broad criticism of all three, and I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that it lacks a central character, even sort of a central two, really. You've got a lot of people with a lot of stuff going on. Kind of would have worked better as a TV series almost.
Yeah, that's true. And the fact that Lucas stuck in there like a 1950s inspired diner, it feels really out of sync with everything else. Because even when even like every other element of his investigation, it's there's a sense of world building to it. We see the Jedi archives, we see Yoda teaching the younglings, we see him travel to Camino and yet another planet that's defined by a particular type of weather or terrain.
That's how geography works.
Yeah, of course. But I even that, like the concept of this planet that's basically all ocean and nonstop storming, and the design of those, the design of the Kaminoans, I think actually holds up in large part, especially the close-ups on them. I don't know if that's animatronic or exactly how they did the close-ups on Lama Su and Tan Wei, and I can't believe I remembered their names.
Yeah, I'm impressed by that.
I told you I've seen this movie a lot, and it was mostly the Obi-Wan storyline that kept bringing me back. So we heard mention of the Clone Wars, obviously, in A New Hope. So when the title of this came out, even though Attack of the Clones is already kind of a B-movie inspired title, it at least promised that we were going to learn more about what the Clone Wars are. And so were you satisfied by the reveal that it was a clone army and I guess the inception point for the Empire?
Yeah, absolutely. This is where I think, the whole Clone Wars thing is why I think I love the prequels. I said it. I love them.
It's on record.
It's the strongest element of the prequels is the politics that causes them and the actual scenes of the Clone Wars themselves, especially. I love the battle scene at the end. I love the mass Jedi fight in the arena. I think those are the strongest parts of it, of the film itself. The Clone Army thing, I can see why he went for that and where it fits in. But then, if you want to be really nitpicky, there's the kind of you're too short to be a stormtrooper line and things like that in the first one that kind of peel that back and say that, these clones didn't survive and etc. But I think there's the line in A New Hope where it's like you fought in the Clone Wars, and I think that there you go. And the reasons for the Clone Wars happening, fine, it all fits in. That for me makes sense. If you want to really nitpick, of course you can find holes where it doesn't. But for me it makes sense, and I really enjoy all the battle scenes we get in the next two films from it.
Yeah, I like the reveal of the Clone Army, the fact that we get a little bit of the Imperial March in there already from John Williams. The only thing about that whole element that I felt left kind of cold by after this film was the convoluted explanation with, I was recruited by a guy named Tyrannus, and there's requests placed by Sifo Dyas, a Jedi that we've never heard of, and it's not ever really made clear in the movies if Sifo Dyas was like being manipulated by Dooku, if he was already dead and Dooku just stole his, they never really clear that up, and I was actually waiting for that to be addressed in Revenge of the Sith, and it never came up, so I was like, okay.
It's none of that was left on a cutting room floor either. I mean, the deleted scenes you get on both the DVD releases and things like that. None of that's in there really. And whatever, if they were in there, they weren't developed much further than maybe the script. Have you ever watched any of the deleted scenes on Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith?
I have. It's been a while since I've seen them. The main one that really sticks out
more
from
political stuff.
That's true. Attack of the Clones, I remember, and I guess in a second we'll transition to this part of the story. But it was a lot more of Anakin and Padme, and like her parents for some reason, and things like that. But Revenge of the Sith, they had deleted scenes. It was basically an entire deleted subplot that I think was going to be a live action TV show at that point that never really came to pass, but it was like the birth of the rebellion and Padme being instrumental in that.
Yeah, I would have liked that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Especially since Padme doesn't really have a whole lot to do in Revenge of the Sith except being pregnant and then dying, basically.
Exactly.
Which is a waste of Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
But in this film, I like the Obi-Wan Jango battle in the rain. That's, I thought, really fun because we have never really gotten a blaster versus saber duel before. Some of the CG doesn't really hold up, especially with everything being wet and things like that.
Yeah, you're right. Like to see a Jedi kind of fight, non-Jedi. I mean, it does happen in the original trilogy a bit, I suppose, in Return of the Jedi. But
yes.
He's quickly defeated. It's over very quickly when Boba tries to go for Luke.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cool fan servicey bits in this one, and episode 1 obviously was dripping with that, but this one, it actually feels like it fits more in line with the storyline. We see the Slave One. There's the great little moment where Jango was walking onto the ship and bumps his head on the door, which is a reference to the Stormtrooper in A New Hope. All that stuff. I loved all those little Easter eggs that he throws in there. And then this is kind of, Obi-Wan tracks him down, does the reference to Empire, where I guess Boba Fett had seen, I think, because I listened to the commentary a million years ago too. So I guess Boba Fett had seen Obi-Wan kind of hiding in the spare parts, and it was how he figured out that Han Solo was drifting away with the garbage in Empire. So little things like that I really appreciate. And then that's pretty much the end of Obi-Wan's storyline. He tracks him to Geonosis and witnesses finally seeing Christopher Lee. He gets kind of captured by Christopher Lee's Dooku. What do you? First of all, Christopher, like the older kind of the elder actors in these films, like Ian McDiarmid, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing in the original, like I think they pretty much consistently bring it, and I think they understand exactly the kind of movie that they're in. I mean, I mentioned Ian McDiarmid in the Phantom Menace episode. Obviously, I'm going to get to that much more when I talk about Revenge of the Sith in that episode. But he knows exactly when to dial it down and be really understated and quietly menacing. I'm thinking like the Darth Plagueis, the Legend of Darth Plagueis in Revenge of the Sith. But then to really ham it up when he's like going full Sidious. And I think Christopher Lee similarly strikes a nice balance in this film.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna do what we normally do on my own podcast, which is compare an actor's performance to Alan Rickman in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, because it's exactly like that. He knows when to just go crazy and like chew the set, kind of really physical performance all over the place, big kind of like shouting, like when the scene doesn't really call for it, but yeah, when he needs to be, he's this like threatening, really quite scary, sort of vile kind of character. I always use that because that's another British actor, so I'll keep plugging them. But yeah, Ian McDiarmid is I would say, the standout kind of performance, really. Because like you say, he knows when to go. Once more, the Sith will rule the galaxy, and
exactly.
And even before he's sort of become the Emperor, really, he's you can always realize what he's up to, but you can see why the rest of the characters don't. He's being this mentor to Anakin, but at the same time, you know what he's up to as the viewer.
Of course. And I think that's a similar type of deal with Christopher Lee. Like when he's captures Obi-Wan, and he has Obi-Wan suspended in the that energy field, I guess. He's trying to appeal to Obi-Wan and trying to do that classic Sith move of join me and together we can destroy the Sith, like that whole thing. Like you even see Kylo Ren trying to pull on Rey even now, like several films later. And you almost question for if you didn't have the toys where he's holding the red lightsaber and the marketing really blowing it, you'd be like, well, is he trying to defect to the other side in order to double agent it, or what's going on?
I mean, Christopher Lee's criminally underused.
For sure.
But I mean, you can't. Yeah, George Lucas isn't the only one to have done that. He's underused by Peter Jackson as well.
But it's crazy that he was mid 80s at this point or something like that, early to mid 80s, and he was in all these huge movies in the early 2000s.
But yeah, if you want, he's the guy I would have cast as well. I need this kind of menacing, definitely British, got to be a British guy. Christopher Lee's the guy you go to for that. Someone who seems wise, but is definitely concerned on the threat.
Absolutely. So I think we need to transition into the least compelling part of this film. So Obi-Wan has his fun little detective tale going on, and Anakin and Padme, meanwhile, are eating floating fruit and rolling around in grass and talking about sand and wishing that they could wish away their feelings and all of that stuff. So I think we're on the same page as saying this is probably the weakest subplot, element, sequence, whatever, of definitely this film, if not the prequel trilogy as a whole.
I just don't know who it's for.
Right. Yeah.
Kids are bored. The fans are bored. I mean, what was this like? Bring a date. She'll really enjoy this bit. There's so much of it, and I don't know who it was aimed at. It's just mystifying to me. And also, it's probably a wide criticism of George Lucas, but he doesn't know his limits, maybe. Romance writing is definitely one of his limits.
Which is why it's strange to me that this is the only film that he's directed that he didn't write by himself, at least doesn't have sole writing credit on. It's was Jonathan Hales brought in to fix this? Because if so, he didn't do a good job. What elements did he polish up on George's script? Yeah,
and I mean, I'd have said maybe George talked to a woman on this one. They might have had a better angle on a romance plot. Not to pigeonhole people, but run it by a few women at least. Some of the things Anakin says, are these romantic?
He's like, so what ladies are into is complaining about sand and then creeping up on their shoulder and starting to caress them, right? Talking about how everything's nice and smooth, right? Isn't that how you initiate a romantic interlude? I mean,
most women usually start a romance with a man they've said, "Please don't look at me like that. You're making me feel uncomfortable."
Yeah, exactly. And then go on to pretend that they're injured so that they can get close to you and talk about how dictatorship maybe not such a bad idea. And I mean, it's
some chicks must be into fascism, but probably not one that's a democratically elected senator.
you would think. And it's not. And then not only that, of course, his other element of his story is the dreams about his mom, which I liked all that. I mean, obviously we know he's insanely attuned to the Force, so him having these prophetic dreams kind of makes sense. We know from the original trilogy that Luke is having visions of it. Yeah, exactly. So that actually follows up on Phantom Menace really well. We get a little bit of Pernilla August there, and he gets to I actually think that moment is one of the only emotionally affecting parts of this film, and I don't know if it's really more because of Pernilla August or if Hayden Christensen actually sticks the landing in that scene per se.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said, I think Hayden Christensen can deliver when he's
right.
It's a criticism a lot of people have made, but George Lucas isn't kind of an actor's director. He won't give them a lot of direction on you should look like this. We'll redo it and be like this. So I mean, he's kind of going, just cry. And, I think he delivers that quite well. And yeah, like the more emotional scenes he gets in the third film, I think he does well on those. And yeah, like as you said, yeah, Prunella's great, and together, yeah, they've got a good chemistry. It's weird because she had a good chemistry with Jake Lloyd in Phantom Menace too.
Exactly.
So I think that obviously shows how good she is more than how good Jake Lloyd is.
Well, of course. And then so that transitions into the massacre on the Tusken Raider camp.
Good scene.
Which I agree. And his first, I think, substantive step towards the dark side, where he's legit tapping into his anger and letting the hate flow through him, as the Emperor says at one point, and I think Return of the Jedi. So we get a little audio clip from Qui-Gon, Anakin, no, kind of from the beyond, hinting at that. And Yoda obviously senses that Anakin's in pain, but, doesn't do anything about it, I guess. It's just to let us know the Jedi are attuned to stuff. They're just not really good at taking action, I guess, is what it is.
I think this definitely comes up in the Plinkett reviews, how he says, once he kills the Sand People, he's already Darth Vader at that point. But then I don't think that comes across. He seems quite remorseful and upset by what he's done, for starters. But also, all the Jedis we've seen up until this point have always got angry and done stuff. Like even in the Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan that's how he defeats Darth Maul is through anger. Right. Let the hate flow through you.
Good point.
Yeah, which is why I've enjoyed. One of the things I enjoyed about The Last Jedi is when I'm saying there isn't really this binary force, good and evil. You have to use both sides to be truly effective at achieving what you want. It's what you use the force for that's important.
I'm glad you brought that up, because in my discussion with Phantom Menace, they mention you think this boy is going to fulfill the prophecy, bringing balance to the Force, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like that has remained a question mark throughout the entire saga. And it felt like The Last Jedi is really keying that up to be the concluding point in the Rise of Skywalker, that maybe that there won't be, this is a theory that's really going around online, but that there won't be Jedi or Sith, and there will just be Force users, just that embrace a balance of both. Because I think, and I've talked about this on this podcast before, I did a whole hour-long thing of just me recording my thoughts about the trailer that came out a little while ago, and it feels like that's you're not going to achieve balance. First of all, if there's only good Force users in the world or bad, I think you have to recognize the dichotomy within yourself and find that like you said, channel it for the purposes of good.
Well, not to get too political about it all, but right. Certainly where I'm from right now, we're going through this Brexit process, etc., and our politics is completely polarized between left and right, and really, what's needed is a compromise between the two, and that's the kind of that's how I've always seen what they mean by bring balance to the Force is bring the two users together, and you can't always win a fight without getting angry.
Exactly.
As is constantly proved throughout all the Star Wars films.
Exactly. Yeah, there's by pushing down any negative emotion, that's not healthy either. You have to process it and work through it and channel it, like we've been saying, and use it to fuel your objective, things like that. And I'm living in a country where Donald Trump is president, so I totally understand what you're saying as far as
I don't want to get too involved in that.
I don't. We're not going to get deep into that. But regardless of what side people are on, it's a kind of a crazy world out there right now politically. And the Star Wars films, no matter how much screen time George devotes to it, are politics is at the forefront of everything.
It's all over the prequels, definitely. There's literally you're either with me or you're my enemy. Literally basically a direct George Bush quote.
So I liked all of that. I thought it was the way that the Lars family was brought into it, I think was kind of interesting. and we learn about the Shmi. We get a revisit with Watto on Tatooine, and then we meet Owen and Beru and all of that. Having obviously seen the original trilogy, seeing the Lars moisture farm at this earlier point, do you think that was a decent setup for what we see from the Lars family, I guess, in A New Hope? Not that they're the most interesting characters, but it's table setting for where Luke ends up at the end of Revenge of the Sith.
It makes sense. If we're going with this, they were split up at birth. But Leia is Luke's sister, and we've got to get to that point. Exactly. To have this, their whole farm sort of spring up from nowhere. It's something to be in this very easy to find remote location. If they're living in the middle of Mos Eisley, like quite difficult to find.
Exactly.
Would have been good for them to have the farm, and it's a bit of fan service, and I've always enjoyed it. That bit's never bothered me in the slightest, except she's probably dead. He seems quite like, we had one go at getting her back.
He's like, yeah. And he's like, we're going to go out there. It's a little confusing. You get mixed messages from Cliegg Lars, because he says, I went out there with, I forget how many he says, like 8 of us went out, like 2 came back or whatever. He's like, but we're going to go back out there once I heal from my missing leg. And then 2 seconds later, he's like telling Anakin, your mother is dead, accept it. I'm like, wait, are you going to go back out there and try and find her? Or is that it? You're like, too late. Yeah. I'll move on now.
Again, not a great bit of script writing, really. And yet another scene where people just kind of sit.
Sit around drinking blue milk.
Yep.
Again, another fan service thing. You got. I
was very much on board with the blue milk.
Same.
Wouldn't have worked without it.
But also, as obnoxious as his hatred of sand is in this movie, especially, which they set up in Phantom Menace, it does make sense of why they would bring Luke here. He's never going to want to go back to the planet where he was a slave, where his mom died in his arms. Plus, he just doesn't like sand. So, exactly. Why would he look for his son there? It's controlled by the Hutts and everything anyways. There's not really, much of a Republic presence there for the Empire to really worry about, at least at that early stage.
I mean, my whole thing with he's become Darth Vader. His whole reason for turning was to save Padme. Once Padme's gone, he's made that change. His interest in his children would be zero. He's a Sith now. All he cares about is himself. That's the Sith. So this whole, he'd just go and find those children and kill them. Like, he basically wouldn't even register that they existed still. His main interest was Padme. Once Padme's gone, his motivations are gone. And maybe he would go try and resurrect her, maybe, once he realizes that wasn't going to happen. Just be this pure ball of anger, which you see, like for all the extended universe kind of things, where he's just being a real scumbag to people all over the galaxy.
I mean, even in his brief appearance in something like Rogue One, you get Vader as this just
ball of anger.
Exactly. So I mean, that kind of brings to the end of the Anakin Padme thing, and then really the third segment of the film is full on Geonosis, and as you alluded to earlier, this is why I come here to this movie. Like, absolutely. I love the Obi-Wan detective stuff.
This is when it gets. This is for me when it gets like Star Wars again, almost.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Because the Phantom Menace, it doesn't hit any of the beats for me as a Star Wars movie, but once we get to all the lightsabers lighting up in the stands of the Geonosis arena, I'm like, here we go. Right, let's see some Jedi's kick some ass, and I'm really I am. Once from that point on in this film, I'm sold. This is when I start to really, really enjoy it.
The promise of these prequels is the potential to see the Jedi Order at their full extent, and even at this point, they mention in the opening crawl and early in the first few scenes, I think that the Jedi are being spread all over the place, all across the galaxy. They're kind of already starting to be tested. And this gives us like our first real taste of what a Jedi army looks like,
and how they could always say, "Oh, the Jedi for years they kept peace and order in the galaxy," and you always say, "Well, like how they're always like moving around in ones and twos, they can't seem to do anything." So you realize, that some little rebel army would get up, the Jedi would find out, they'd move there in force and just wipe them out. That's why, that's how they kept peace and order in the galaxy.
And the pieces start to fall into place here. We see that the Trade Federation Viceroy is still on a revenge mission against Padme from Episode 1. We see all of the different forces, the Techno Union Army or whatever, and like all the different like political factions joining up with the Separatists. And the fact that the Geonosians are developing the blueprints for the Death Star, all of that stuff. Like it's like I said, it actually feels like it's leading towards the original trilogy, as opposed to Episode 1, where it's just like, oh, okay, so trade blockade. Where is this going?
And you don't really know why there's a trade blockade, etc. It's kind of alluded to, but it's also a part of this big plan. And then, as you say, you kind of realize what they're trying to do. And the Separatists aren't just these people who are rebelling against sort of bureaucracy of the democratic side of the Republic, etc. It's, really they're bad guys, and they've got some bad plans. They want to take over and create a kind of fascist state.
It feels like the seeds for the Galactic Civil War here, and. We get some of the sequences leading up to the Battle of Geonosis, the Anakin and Padme going through the droid factory. That's all obviously very video gamey.
Those aren't the best.
not the greatest. But there are elements there that I do like. R2-D2 flying, I love that. Some of the little battle moments within that sequence. Even the C-3PO head switch, which is obviously there for the younger viewers more than anything else. That's, I'll take that over Jar Jar Binks bumbling his way through a battle, if that's the case, And I've rewatched these movies with my wife as well. She it's kind of, I never really noticed it was going on, but there's a scene where Anakin and Padme sort of come into the Geonosis droid factory. And there's all these Geonosians like kind of asleep in like a little dormitory, and it's really kind of creepy how they like wake up and attack them. I just never sort of really registered that scene at all until my wife was like, "Oh, I don't like that at all." It's actually quite a good scene. But then it's because like a lot of the time in the prequels, you're not given enough time to digest a thing happens and you're immediately into something else, and immediately after that you're into the droid factory and there's all kinds of wacky hijinks. Well, and then when Anakin and Padme get caught, even though their romance is kind of ridiculous in this movie, I still really like that moment. The kiss where she's like, I truly, deeply love you. And she's like, I thought we decided not to be in love because we destroy our lives. And she's like, our lives are about to be destroyed. All of that. I mean, I'm like, really? You love this guy? I mean, all right, whatever. Sure. Agree to disagree. But that moment, the kiss, and
that's a good moment. And that's a well-written moment and a well-shot moment. And the trouble is, all leading up to that point, it isn't. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah, like you say, it doesn't make sense that she suddenly fall in love with him. It would have made more sense for them to go through this kind of epic, kind of dangerous adventure together. And that would have bonded them more than them getting to know each other and romancing each other on a beautiful planet.
And at that moment is also really bolstered by John Williams' score, which again is consistently good pretty much throughout this entire saga. Yeah. But in this one, the major theme is that Across the Stars, the love theme that happens most pronounced in that moment and at the end in the wedding scene, obviously. I like that introduction into the execution, the sort of snarkiness with Obi-Wan is like, he's like, we're coming to rescue you, Master. Like, good job. And all of that, like all that stuff with the three of them, because I do ultimately like those three characters. Yeah. It's just, I don't like the Anakin and Padme coupling, which is unfortunate. And then, but that's the moment that's the movie switches off out of that mode.
Yeah. I think it becomes a really awesome action movie from that point on. You've got if I kind of compare it to a typical 80s sort of Sylvester Stallone kind of thing. He would have had this love interest, and then another action star would have come along. You'd have had this awesome action scene. The trouble is, it's just that what comes before it. I mean, you've got a pretty good storyline with Obi-Wan. It's just this, God, it's hard to be invested in the Anakin and Padme romance. Because it's so badly written, so badly shot. And I don't get who it was for. It would have made more sense for her to just suddenly, just go, we've been through a lot of battles together. I really respect you now. Let's kiss. And John Williams Scott probably would have carried that through.
Or, as you mentioned, if their love was really born out of just shared experiences, going on this dangerous mission. It's like, it makes me think of something like, this is a random reference, but it makes me think of something like Speed, where at the end of that movie, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock are together. And they're so it's like, do they have like an enduring romance? No, but they were doing this traumatic event together. And so they're like, hey, we should try and get together and see what happens. And so that would have made more sense to apply the Speed formula of romance, I guess, to Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, and essentially his Anakin's motivation for doing what he does is born out of not wanting her to die in childbirth. You quite quickly have just changed the story to be, I don't want my son and daughter to die, rather than less of an interest in Padme, maybe. And just him like, my vision was you all died in childbirth, so I need to keep you safe because I want my children. It doesn't necessarily have to be like madly in love with Padme, more in the idea of being a father, especially, he had a pretty shitty childhood. He was a slave.
Right, exactly.
There's a motivation there for wanting to keep his own children safe and away from bad people.
So we have the Jedi all swarm in, and then we have a very, very abbreviated battle with Mace Windu, Samuel L. Jackson rocking the purple lightsaber, which is really fun,
exactly.
And Jango Fett, and that does not last very long. But I think it just gives Sam Jackson the hero moment that he really wanted, just going into this movie. Again,
like Christopher Lee, he's underused.
Yes,
but again, is he the best person to play a Jedi? He would have been great as like a kind of Han Solo kind of character, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because Sam Jackson's signature is his swagger, it's his attitude and his confidence. And in here, he just stands around in robes being like, oh, bring them before us.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I don't think we could know that.
Do what you want. I don't care.
So much. He's so hands off instead of really channeling what makes him such a compelling on-screen presence. So, from his career perspective, it's useful for him to be in Star Wars, but it doesn't really get a chance to do that much with it, which is unfortunate.
Definitely, yeah. Him and Christopher Lee, like, you've got two great actors there, and there's very little for them to be involved with. But again, this just comes down to the story doesn't centralize itself enough, and the areas it moves into are probably not the way it should have gone. This film could have, even though its redeeming qualities are its action, could have done with some more action.
Yeah. Well, the midsection, I mean, between you get the chase through Coruscant, you get the battle. Well, between the chase through Coruscant, like at the end of, let's say, roughly Act 1, and then the beginning of Act 3 with all the Geonosis stuff, the only real bit of action you get is Obi-Wan and Jango Fett fighting in the rain for, 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's, the whole point of Anakin and Padme moving away together was because, she's under threat of assassination. So maybe she had gone somewhere else and people kept trying to kill her throughout the film. Anakin keeps saving her life. Again, there's another reason to feel closer to the person that keeps saving your life. Now, if there'd been 2 other assassination attempts on her, and he saves her each time, maybe that deserves the kiss.
Yeah, maybe they're getting chased around the galaxy. Yeah, they have to keep moving. That would have been See, I like that we're fixing this movie.
Yeah, I've already, like I said, I did a fan edit. I already tried, but it's quite difficult.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to cut all the romance, and then that gives you at least a leg up.
I wish I'd seen the IMAX reduced version you'd seen. I would have loved it even more.
Yeah, I know. I want to do research and see if I can find that somewhere online, because I do feel like it would have really improved, because this movie is kind of long as is. I think it's like 2 hours and 20 something minutes. So it doesn't, with the story that's being told here, it doesn't need to be that long.
No, it really doesn't. Yeah, because the best bits are mostly at the beginning and the end. Like you say, the second act is filler, really.
Yeah, that's the part there. If you're watching it at home, you let it run. You're like, I'm gonna go get a snack, hit the restroom, go make a quick beer run or something, and then come back. We're like, oh, okay, they're still talking about sand. It's all good.
Yeah, but if I'm still out when it gets to the Geonosis bit, just pause it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, see there, that's a good marking point. So then Obi-Wan and Anakin, they chase Dooku, and then Padme falls out. We get that little moment of tension where Anakin basically says, I don't care about the Jedi Order, I'm worried about Padme. Like, you could see already that his fixation has, in this film, transitions fully from worrying about his mother to worrying about Padme, which leads directly into, as you were mentioning, in the path of the dark side in Revenge of the Sith. So that leads us to the lightsaber battle, and I actually really like this one. I think,
absolutely, loved it too.
We don't get enough of Obi-Wan. He's kind of dispatched pretty quickly. But you see the impetuousness of Anakin.
You've got to see, because people always kind of, before he became Darth Vader, there's always this, he was a great pilot, he was a great warrior, and you don't get long to see that, especially when Revenge of the Sith mainly focuses on how he becomes Darth Vader rather than developing his character. You don't get long to develop Anakin's character, so you've got to see him be a very competent warrior, like in this film. Otherwise it doesn't work. So he's straight in there, and he's able to kind of fight Count Dooku on equal terms quite quickly, even though he eventually loses. But so you get, again, it would have been beneficial to see him fighting more in this film. Otherwise, suddenly he's like, yeah, sure, I can take your lightsaber and take on Count Dooku by myself.
Well, and he's already picking up that Jedi arrogance at the beginning, towards the beginning of the movie. He's trying to crack a joke, and then Obi-Wan says something like, "Oh, if you practice your saber skills as much as you do your wit, you'd rival Master Yoda as a swordsman." He's like, "I thought I already did." Things like that. That we don't really see in action until, I guess, like you said, this point. And it doesn't, he still loses his arm, which again plants the seeds for the original trilogy and the reveal there in Return of the Jedi.
I think I would have liked more maybe in this seeing, because obviously in Empire you see Vader could kill Luke anytime he wanted. It's just like knocking him about for fun and taunting him, trying to turn him. Especially once Obi-Wan's gone, I would have liked to have seen Dooku do that to Anakin. Sort of like just sort of like pick him up with the Force and just like knock him off the walls. And I go like, kill you anytime I like, boy.
After his behavior in this movie, I think we all kind of wanted to see that.
Well, I think the really hardcore Star Wars fans would love to see a cut where he's just utterly beaten. But I'm not one of those people. I kind of like Hayden Christensen.
Yeah. So that doesn't work out for Anakin very well. And then, of course, this moment, I feel like, in the years since this movie was released, I feel like has been criticized a lot more by Star Wars fans. But at the time, this was one of those like stand up and cheer theatrical moments when Yoda comes in and whips out his lightsaber. Well, first he does, they do some Force lifting and energy balls back and forth. He shoots the lightning at him and he catches it, all of that stuff, transitioning into the saber battle with Yoda and Dooku. We had to learn a little bit more about their history, that Yoda was actually one of the ones that trained Dooku, and they had like a very close relationship before he left the Jedi Order. What do you think that Yoda fight holds up? What were your thoughts then compared to now?
Yeah, again, it was a stand up and cheer moment at the time. And I like a lot of, so I'm not a big fan of the Phantom Menace, but Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith. They're not perfect films, but there's a lot in there that I really, really love, and I do really enjoy the Yoda fight. It's not really in fitting with his character, and in the laws of physics, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I love more what it is. And again, if he'd been sort of taunting Anakin at that point, trying to get him to turn, and then Yoda turns up, and he's like, "Right, I'm going to stop you right now." That's even more of a stand up and cheer moment, because Yoda's trying to draw the line in the sand. So that, this kid's on our side. We're keeping Anakin, and it becomes between them, between the light and the dark. I would have enjoyed it more, but again, it's who you decide these films are for, and certainly I enjoyed it, and also I watched it with my dad, and he must have been in his late 40s at the time, so he loved it too. We both came out of the cinema enjoying that moment immensely between the two of us. And for me, Star Wars has always been a family thing. All of us love it. Even my mum, my dad, even my grandparents like Star Wars. We all enjoyed that as a family. So if you want to look at it from a cinema critic point of view, maybe it's not the best thing in the world. But if you see the Star Wars films as films for families, then it's a great scene, and we all enjoyed it. That's what matters.
I concede the point that some of the leaping around and all that is a little much.
Absolutely,
he's literally flipping back and forth in the air at one point. But as a fan of as you're saying, as a fan of the Star Wars movies, and Yoda being actually one of my favorite characters, I love the fact that we finally get to see him fight. We get to see him use his small stature to his advantage. The fact that he says, in Empire, judge me not by my size, that whole thing. Or judge me by my size, do you? That thing. And then the great moment at the end where he stops channeling the Force and picks up his cane and starts walking again, reverting back to the 800-something-year-old creature that he is. I loved all that stuff. And the fact that it gives Yoda a more prominent role in these in the prequel trilogy from this point on. I mean, he has a much bigger role here than he does in Phantom Menace. And then in Revenge of the Sith, he's key to the climax. He's one of the four people in the two-way battle that's going on at the, concluding the whole trilogy. So I love that, and I think that I could always do with more Yoda, which is why I was so happy in The Last Jedi when he showed up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, more Yoda would have been good. It's just that, like we discussed this earlier at the beginning, how he seems quite easily defeated by the Emperor. Palpatine's always kind of manipulating him. I would have liked to have seen Yoda perhaps understand what was going on more, but perhaps see that certain things had to happen for another reason. I don't know. To me, I think in the prequels, Yoda seems more like he's respected as this guy that could really easily kick your ass, rather than as this very wise person. His wisdom doesn't really come into play very much at all in the prequels. It's more
that's a good point.
I don't want Yoda to come get me because he'll kick my ass, more than Yoda's going to know what's going on.
Right.
I need to be more careful because Yoda's going to figure it out. Would be better than I don't want to mess with Yoda who's really, really handy with a lightsaber. Because he's exactly. He's a tiny little green guy. He should be more like, man, Yoda is completely in tune with the Force. If I try and do anything wrong, he's going to know what I'm doing. Would be a better line than, I don't want to mess with him because he's an awesome warrior. But I did also really enjoy watching him fight.
Oh yeah, well, for sure. Well, because he'd been a character for 20-something years at that point, and we had never seen him fight at all.
No.
We saw him train Luke and lift some rocks and an X-wing, things like that, but we hadn't really ever seen him actually engage in combat. But it's fun to finally get that. But by the same token, he's supposed to be this intellectual threat. And the fact that the film just skirts by a lot of the limitations on the Jedi by saying, "Oh, the dark side clouds everything." Like, okay, well, what the hell? What does that mean? What is the point of the Jedi if they're powerless against the Sith? I mean, isn't that kind of their?
Yeah. Why are you so awesome if you could be once things are clouded? Oh, I'm pretty much useless at this point.
Yeah. He's like, oh, I could take care of like basic stuff, but if there's a Sith Lord, no, not so much. That's as far as I go. I have to pay extra for that.
It makes you wonder how the Jedi defeated the Sith in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I just sheer numbers, since there's always 2 Sith and like an army of Jedi. Maybe who knows how that happened. But then after that, Yoda, Dooku gets away. We see him deliver the blueprints to Sidious, which confirming that we all knew by the fact that Christopher Lee was playing this role that he was probably not a great guy in this film. And Anakin gets married to Padme. So it's pretty much, it's a quick resolution after that point. We get the little begun the Clone War has scene where they acknowledge that we're in a very dark time for the Republic, and it's probably only going to get worse before it gets better. But I like the way that this film, like Empire, like Last Jedi, leaves you with much more of a question mark than the previous or succeeding films in their respective trilogies.
Yeah, Phantom Menace almost ends like they didn't want to make another 2. It's kind of like, yeah, you know who this guy is. You know who he's going to become. It's like, you could have ended it. It's almost like, he thought maybe... I know that at the time he was really worried about the box office numbers for Phantom Menace. It's almost like, maybe he hadn't always assumed he was going to get to make the other 2. Maybe that's why it's a bit like New Hope. It kind of ends like it could end here, but there's always a scope for a sequel.
Of course.
But like Attack of the Clones ends, you know there's going to be more at this point. You couldn't end it on that.
So is there anything about the film that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure we bring up before we kind of close it out?
I don't think there is. No. So you've done well in taking us through the entire movie, really.
Perfect. Yeah. Cool. I think we definitely think that this movie still holds up as a fun movie. It's obviously not, amongst the best Star Wars films, but like I said with Phantom Menace, it's hard for me to dismiss these films out of hand because they are Star Wars still. There's still elements in there that are fun, that capture the spirit of the original trilogy, even if, the romance stuff in this one is not the high point.
No.
A lot of the other stuff is still worth watching, and I don't understand these people that are like, the prequels are terrible, I never watched them. I'm like, well, they're still part of the franchise. So.
I don't know how you can, fine, you can say, I only really enjoy the original trilogy, but I fail to see how you can really call yourself a true Star Wars fan unless you can find some things to enjoy in these films.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's got to be something in there that you liked at one point while watching them, even if you hated them to their very soul. And there's a very special place in my heart for Attack of the Clones, same as Revenge of the Sith. Even Phantom Menace to a certain extent. There's bits of the Phantom Menace that I like a lot as well. Mainly the ending, but.
Right.
Yeah, I like the prequels. I love, obviously not as much as the original trilogy, but I still love them. I'm a Star Wars fan. They're part of Star Wars. I love Star Wars.
Exactly. Yep. That's a perfect way to end the conversation, I think. So, Pete, thank you so much for coming on the Crooked Table podcast. Can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to follow us on Instagram, we're at Pete and Fran Pod. I'm on Twitter at Pete Langhelt. For those of you who've never seen it written down, it's spelt Langhelt. If you want to find the podcast, it's the Pete and Fran Podcast. It's on a lot of places now. Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, Castbox. Can be found on YouTube as well and on SoundCloud.
Great. Definitely check out Pete and Fran Podcast. It's a ton of fun to listen to. So, Pete, thanks so much for coming on the show again. I would definitely love to have you back if you come up with anything.
Absolutely.
That you like, if you really want to talk about any genre, it doesn't matter. Just shoot me a message and let me know, and we'll see about getting you back on the show.
Yeah, likewise, man. If you ever want to come on and chat to us as well, we talk about a lot of weird movies too. So.
Cool. There you go. I'd love to. That'd be great.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me on.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
That's the yard of the little KED.